beds many years from now, would you be willing to trade all the days from this day to that for one chance, just one chance, to come back here and tell our enemies that they may take our lives, but they'll never take our freedom?
To Anti-Tyranny News Radio here on UCY.tv. Thank you for joining me this evening. We are going to dive into this Vegas shooting. My heart goes out to all the families affected by this. Alternative media, mainstream media, celebrities, late night hosts, we'll definitely get into that one, really should be ashamed of themselves, and a lot of things all of those groups have done, and I include alternative media. Kind of a little disgusting, and I'll get into that part a little bit later. We have one full issue. And again, the politics on it, using this as an argument. When you look at statistics, there will be another part of it. The argument technically having I do want to start off with the Ron Paul Liberty report about Vegas slaughter. I'm sure you will learn that. And we'll get into this because he also covers towards the end of this one aspect of it that has been confirmed that is yet to be addressed by mainstream media or any of the investigations, other than they document that this is happening. This is what's going on, but no investigation is happening, and it's not done. Let's go ahead and get into this Ron Paul Liberty report. We'll cover all that. A lot of serious things that need to be discussed, and I want to dive into this pretty in depth. So we'll go ahead and play this Ron Paul Liberty report.
Hello, everybody. Thank you for tuning in to the Liberty Report. With me today is Chris Bozini as co-host. Chris, welcome to the program.
Good morning, Dr. Paul. Great to be with you.
Very good. The big news in the last couple of days, obviously, has been a domestic issue, and that has to do with the killings that occurred in Las Vegas. And, of course, it's very serious. There's a lot of speculation. But since it's happened, it seems to be obvious details were unknown at the beginning and are starting to come out. But the big news for me has been the obsession with interest in the motive. You know, why would somebody want to do this? I think it's very important. I think that's the question they should always ask. It is a question they never ask, when some terrorists come into our country or there's terrorists kill Americans overseas, they never say what really is the motive behind those individuals who want to kill Americans. But we don't know exactly the motive behind Pollock in this incident, but there's already been suggestions connecting to ISIS. ISIS is claiming, support for him. He has a wife that might have connections to the Middle East. So it goes on and on. And I think it's correct to ask about about what exactly the motives are. From the surface, I'd have to say that it really fits the lone wolf, lone nut answer to this. But still, it's pretty outrageous, and it suggests the first thing it said just to me. The NSA and the CIA and the FBI, they do a little spying on us. They know what we had for breakfast last week. They know where we spend our money, and they know where our cell phone is. But they don't know a guy that has 23 rifles in a hotel overlooking thousands of people. So, and some people say, well, that's why we need more surveillance. That's why we need more gun control. And they'll go on and on. And yet the surveillance that we have had, how can you give the government more surveillance over the people? And I think generally in the last several years, anything that had to do with any suggestion of terrorism, the government gets the authority. The Congress just rolls over and say, oh, if it's necessary, we need a Patriot Act. We need, FISA courts. We need more authority because, we're under attack. So there's a lot of questions being raised, and it may turn out that this guy is just plain nuts and went on a rage. Now, his family history even suggests the possibility of mental illness and compulsive criminal behavior. And it may be that, but then there's also the other questions, and rightfully they should do the investigation. But I think the whole issue is that some people will take advantage of this. The far left say, well, obviously we need more gun control, and the other side will say, well, no, we need more surveillance, we need more maneuvering. And I saw the announcement say, anytime you see anything suspicious, report it. So everybody's supposed to spy on their neighbors and spy on people in hotels in order to solve this problem. But we may live in an age of culture of violence. In many ways, maybe as individuals, there's a lot of violence in our streets, but maybe not even more than it used to be. But then we have the issue of the violence that our government participates. What are your thoughts on this, Chris, about looking for the motive and why this might have occurred?
Well, the first thing, obviously, that I noticed was immediately the knee-jerk reaction, and it's become predictable now, is to go straight to the government, federal government, to provide some kind of one-size-fits-all solution. And we really need to think about that because governments, and especially ours, they've destroyed entire nations and threatened to destroy even more. North Korea, totally obliterated. And when we look back at the killing of 500,000 Iraqi children, and our Secretary of State said it was worth it. The federal government is militarizing the local police. So when it comes to violence, to look to this institution for solutions and to make more rules, thinking about rules, the federal government has a constitution, and they don't follow their own rules. They don't follow their own laws. So isn't it odd that the knee-jerk reaction is to look to an institution that is the most violent on earth, and it doesn't follow the rules for a solution? Isn't that strange, Dr. Paul?
It is, and the statistics support your point. The third month of this administration in March, and for instance, that's the only number I have in front of me, we killed over 1,400 civilians in Syria and Iraq, and probably a bunch since then. But they don't count. They're not even on the horizon. But our government is very violent. And what I've used as an example of what's been happening is we as libertarians like the issue of Bastia, the law, that anything that we're not allowed to do, like lie, cheat, and steal, which is very good rules, the government shouldn't be allowed to do it either. Yet the government lies, cheats, and steals and kills also. I mean, more so. And what's happened is the government now is doing it instead of the people's restraints on violence affecting the government and causing them to do less. The violence of the government and them resorting to violence all the time, it causes the people to accept this notion you can use violence. But I think there's a subtle acceptance of violence that even more significant or at least equal to the violence you're mentioning, and it's the violence of the activities of Republicans and Democrats and liberals and conservatives on the use of violence in government, just about everything they do. You know, somebody's hospital is down. Well, we need the government to take care of it. Oh, that's good. You know, we want to help people. Well, where's the government going to do that? So whether it's a flood or a fire or whatever, it's always the use of force. All welfareism is the use of force. All corporate welfare is use of force. And that's in addition to the use of force overseas, telling other people to do. So we do live in a violent culture, and those who love it, are the ones who want gun control on the people. And we have heard stories about some very, very liberal congressmen in Washington who have guns and always arguing for gun control. And they've literally said out loud, but we're special people. We have to be protected. We have to have more guards and we have more guns protecting us because we take care of the people. I think subtly that's what's really bugging people. It isn't ever said explicitly, but it's one of the reasons why the people feel so frustrated with what's going on today in this interrelationship with government and the people.
Yes, and in order to break this mind hold that everybody has to look to the government, we really have to start looking to ourselves and to private protection. I mean, every property owner, it's their property. They are responsible for what happens there. And they should be able to choose between an array of private competing alternatives for security. And those companies, if they fail, they could go bankrupt. So their livelihood is on the line to protect places and to really think of everything. And it has to be done on a local level. This is such a huge country that to think that some people in Washington could create this blanket law or blanket to cover every single nook and cranny of this country, it's an impossibility. It has to be done with people that have skin in the game and on a level where the people are actually on the ground and involved with their own properties.
Yeah, I would say that people who have won so far in claiming they understand the motive or the problems we have would be the anti-gun people, regulate the guns. We did that. They never questioned about, what about a much more disastrous event on 9/11? I mean, nearly 3,000 people died just in a short period of time, and it was done without a gun. It was done with box cutters and airplanes. And do we outlaw box cutters and airplanes? How about automobiles as a weapon? They're being used in places where there's more restrictions on guns. So it isn't the weapon itself that is the problem. There's something more that determines this, and that is the use of violence. After 9/11, immediately the question was, what was the motive behind it? The answer popped up immediately, just like the answer so far on this is too many guns, we'll regulate guns. But after 9/11, it was instantaneous. Well, they attack us for our freedom. They attack us for our prosperity, for our Constitution, and for our liberties. And that has stuck. The President Bush put that out there, and they repeated it over and over and over again. And therefore, they establish the instrument of the attack on us. And this is, they've totally denied, and they're in total denial. They never saw the aftermath. Matter of fact, the goal was to cover up the real reason that we were attacked. And, of course, that was blowback. More people now believe that to be the case than there were around when I first talked about that in a presidential debate. Back then it was sort of new to the ordinary person, but it was not new to a lot of people, we found out. So, yes, that is the big thing is the motivation. And so often, there's no way that I'm suggesting that this particular incident had anything to do with it, but I'm not surprised that they threw in the Islamic radicals and a connection, and ISIS has claimed, that he's one of them, the guy that did all the shooting. So they're always using that, and there are some, the neocons would love to have a connection. If there is a connection, that justifies their wars. Instead of saying the wars are causing the problem, they'll say, yes, it's those radicals. Look, they're infiltrating us now, and they've influenced our, the people here in the United States. The truth is, the people who get killed by these massive shootings in this country are very, very rarely killed by, done by outsiders coming into our country. They're usually American-born who lost their way or became idiots. I do want to make one suggestion, then I'll go back to you, Chris, is that when there has been so many of these shootings domestically by young people in schools and things, almost always it's connected to psychotropic drugs. And if this guy was a little bit off his rocker and he lives in Las Vegas where drugs are readily available, who knows what he was on. But I hope when they do an autopsy, if they find it, who knows what will happen. Most time autopsies, it certainly didn't help us in the Kennedy assassination. But I believe it's very possible this guy could have been on drugs, but that, again, won't explain the whole picture.
Yes, you make some great points, especially about the focus on the weapons. And, terrorists have done the same thing, killed the same amount of people with trucks, but there was no uproar for truck control or banning trucks. But with guns, it's knee-jerk. Oh, you must ban them. But banning, we know, doesn't work. Drugs are banned, but they're everywhere. Anybody can get them. So, but it's a feel-good solution that if government just bans these things, and that'll take care of the solution. But it's not the case, even remotely the case.
And I imagine the numbers are 100 to 1 or even greater of the people we kill overseas versus the people that end up getting killed in the United States. So maybe banning guns in a specific incident might help. And that is the guns we sell. The guns, just think of those guns that we send to the moderates in Syria, because even though they're radicals and they're not really on our side, we give them their guns because they say, well, we want to get rid of Assad, so we want them to do our dirty work. So we give a lot of guns and weapons, and just think how many went into Libya, and then from Libya over into Syria, how many guns ended up in the hands of the people who were fighting the government people and the Americans who were in Iraq. So I would think that would be a great step in the right direction. Let's just ban the exporting of weapons. Let's cut down on the business on the arms industry. They're making a lot of money on this. It's a racket, and we know it, and it leads up to no good. And also, not only does it end up killing a lot of other people, it also sets the stage for blowback. And once again, this incident is not labeled blowback. Could be, but right now you can't say that. But there's still a lot of killing going on because we still have a lot of vulnerabilities overseas. The anger grows because, now we have sort of a sterile way of killing people with drones. And, we don't expose the lives of Americans, which is very good, but it doesn't diminish the hatred and the desire to get us out of those countries. I think most of the violence coming from those who want to kill Americans are the ones who are really want to defend their homeland. That's why sometimes they get support. We figure, why would they support these nutty people? It's mainly because they don't like foreigners in their land, just like we wouldn't want them in our land taking us over. So that, I think, is a lot to do. But that would mean that we have to change our foreign policy, and also the reason why it was absolutely necessary for the neocons not to allow people to start thinking that 9/11 was a consequence of a deeply flawed foreign policy.
Yes, and for my closing thought, Dr. Paul, even though we try to steer away from these bad ideas of looking to this violent government for solutions, and that we need more freedom, more private protection, this is not a utopian idea. It won't eliminate all violence because the human mind cannot be boxed in. We say it with the government. You can't box them in with rules. They'll just break them. And there will always be a small percentage of people that will be violent because we're free individuals. So there will be some that choose that road. Fortunately, the vast majority of people do not choose that road. If that was the case, life would be very, very tough. So I guess the main point is to stop looking for this one-size-fits-all solution from the Wizard of Oz in Washington, D.C., because it's just not going to happen.
Right, and I think the violence of government is really the big issue, and we have to address that, and that is exactly what we've been talking about. But if we don't understand that the government is not there to commit violence and set the stage for this, the government should be restraining it, if anything. But they need to get out of the business of aggression and initiation of force and preemptive war, because this is what leads to so much trouble. Yes, we will continue to have violence. There will be violent people. There are sick people, and there are people who actually have not only derangement because they learned something that was wrong, but they've also been deranged organically too. But that's the way the world's been. But that doesn't mean that we have to declare war against the whole world and blame it on something that doesn't really exist, that they hate us because we're free. That is not the case. They have other justifications, but it's up to us to decide what our foreign policy ought to be and what our purpose is for our government. The purpose should be very limited. It's to protect liberty, to provide the rights of people to own property, the people to have voluntary contracts and have a voluntary society, not one that is overly regulated and depends on the violence of government redistributing wealth and telling people how to live. This ends up on the type of system we have today, where everybody seems to be unhappy. But it could be reversed rather simply by just accepting the principle of non-aggression. Nobody, and especially government, do not have the right to initiate force against another person. I want to thank everybody for tuning in today to the Liberty Report. Please come back soon.
Ron Paul Liberty Report, RonPaulLibertyReport.com, and Ron Paul Liberty Report on YouTube. Check them out. Subscribe. Now, one thing that was pointed out at the end was this idea of utopia. And whether people are ignorant to the facts or they understand, they understand it, that gun laws, of course, aren't going to work. And they literally are using people's deaths to push this gun control. And it's this idea of some utopia. Well, when you don't have the right to protect yourself, some of the evilest people will find their way into government. And they already, I believe, do. There are probably people with evil intentions in Congress. They like the power. People dying probably is not a large issue to them as long as it's no one close to them. Or again, they don't pay attention to the facts. They're unwilling to look at the facts because they live in a fallacy, and they choose not to look at the facts because that fallacy of creating a utopia. They maybe watch too many futuristic sci-fi utopian movies, even though can't really name one. Even movies where the everyday person doesn't have a firearm usually doesn't end well for the people. Or the people become the hero and they end up with firearms. So, this utopia, and it's the same utopia that they always want to claim libertarians have. Oh, you think with absolute freedom, everything will be great. No, we're saying it's not great either way, but at least this way we have choices. We have the freedom to make our own choices. we're not relying on government to save us, because there's families out there right now that government didn't save. Yes, you can claim there's families that government did save, but there's families that can also claim the opposite. And you don't always know, and you can't always predict who's going to snap one day. But towards the end there, in that Ron Paul Liberty Report, they also brought up psychotropic drugs. Well, I have this from Fox News. A report alleges that Stephen Paddock, the gunman who opened fire on a packed country music concert in Las Vegas on Sunday, was prescribed an anti-anxiety medication in the months leading up to his attack. According to Las Vegas Review-Journal, Paddock was prescribed 50 10 milligram diazepam tablets and was instructed to take one pill daily, although it is not clear if he had been taking them regularly. The drug, marketed as Valium, is part of a class of medication known as anxiolytic, I believe, and sedative, which are commonly referred to as benzodiazepines. Scott DeHorty, LCSWC Executive Director of Maryland House Detox Delphi Behavioral Health, told Fox News by email. Citing the Nevada Prescription Monitoring Program, the Las Vegas Review-Journal identified Dr. Stephen Winkler as a prescribing physician, but he was not made available for comment. What is it prescribed for? Doherty said diazepam can be used to treat a range of symptoms, including anxiety disorders, muscular spasms, and alcohol withdrawal-related seizures. He said the specific use of the medication is dependent on the doses administered. How does it work? When administered correctly, diazepam works to enhance the effects of GABA, a neurotransmitter found in the neurons of the cortex in the brain that helps to reduce stress and anxiety. GABA also contributes to motor control, vision, and other cortical functions. Potential side effects. Doherty described diazepam as a highly addictive medication which can have paradoxical effects. He can caution that continued use of the medication could cause patients to suffer from symptoms they initially sought relief from. Additional side effects may include confusion, dependence, drowsiness, weakness, insomnia, anxiety, and headaches. It is also very dangerous to discontinue using it without consulting a physician. Doherty said that discontinuation effects can be fatal. He added that benzodiazepine abuse has shown a continued rise in recent years. Paddock died of a self-inflicted gunshot wound before police stormed his hotel room on the 32nd floor of the Mandalay Bay. More than 59 Route 91 Harvest Festival attendees were killed and over 500 more injured in the 11-minute attack. That was from Fox News. Now, I definitely think there's a link because these type of drugs tend to show up not just in some of these mass murders, because it has a lot of these mass murders are on some type of psychotropic drug, something that's affecting their thoughts and the way they feel, and you don't know how it's going to affect each person. I think that's been proven. And just watch, some of these cop videos where you do have people on these drugs that are they're losing it. What's he on? He took some Valium and, a lot of these drugs pop up in a lot of these, and we know a lot of kids, young adults have been dying on this medication, abusing it. And then we have it prescribed to people, and it tends to have the reverse effect. Now, I want to get to a really bad late night comedian that isn't funny. A guy that will go to the extent of using his own family to push an agenda. Someone I don't have a whole lot of respect for. He's either, ignorant of facts, or he's pushing a agenda on really the emotions and the fears of society on the left, of course, because that's who watches people like this. Now, I have an article here from The Blaze. Ben Shapiro talks gun rights, deconstructs Jimmy Kimmel's viral rant, who died and made him Jesus. Conservative author and speaker Ben Shapiro excoriated late-night TV host Jimmy Kimmel for politicizing the deadly mass shooting in Las Vegas. What did Kimmel say? Kimmel described the massacre during his show and segued into a call for gun control. I've been reading comments from people, this is a quote, saying this is terrible, but there's nothing we can do about it. But I disagree with that intensely because, of course, there's something we can do about it, Kimmel said. There is a lot of things we could do about it, but we don't. He also addressed the Second Amendment and made a joke that the Founding Fathers wanted us to have AK-47s and said that the National Rifle Association not only controls the GOP, but runs the country as well. GOP lawmakers should be praying for God to forgive them for letting the gun lobby run this country because it's so crazy, Kimmel ranted. Kimmel later said, your thoughts and your prayers are insufficient. What was Shapiro's response? Shapiro in a Tuesday video addressed Kimmel's Monday night monologue. Jimmy Kimmel should not be cheered for what he said, Shapiro said. Jimmy Kimmel should be asked to provide the evidence for his supposition rather than the evidence for his emotions. Although Shapiro believed Kimmel's sentiments to be sincere, sincerity does not make what you are saying smart. The conservative author noted that Kimmel's statement about GOP lawmakers praying for forgiveness is nothing more than political rhetoric to further divide the country. Quote, last night he did a long shtick about gun control that was entirely based on emotion, and it was really nasty, Shapiro said. It was really nasty. I don't think it was nasty because he doesn't care. He cares. It's really nasty because he suggests that you and I don't care. I think it's disgusting, what he said. He added that those who don't agree with Kimmel's evidenceless suggestions about gun control means that we are bad people and that we don't care. You want to know why the country is not unified? It's because of stuff like this, Shapiro said. He noted that division in the U.S. doesn't stem from disagreeing on policy, but because certain groups within the country feel necessary to impute bad motives to people who disagree. Who's Jimmy Kimmel to decide whether your thoughts and your prayers are insufficient? Shapiro asked. So your thoughts and prayers are only sufficient if you do what Jimmy Kimmel wants you to do? That's the way this works now. Who died and made him Jesus? Shapiro wasn't finished there, however. How did this work again exactly that Jimmy Kimmel gets to be the great moral arbiter of our time? A late-night talk show host who used to host the Man Show with women bouncing on trampolines. He's now the great arbiter of what constitutes morality in politics, and if you disagree with him, your thoughts and prayers are insufficient. It doesn't matter if you are fervently praying for the victims. It doesn't matter that you were donating your time or your blood. None of that matters if you disagree with Jimmy Kimmel. What you've done today is insufficient. You must pay. You will burn in the fiery bowels of Jimmy Kimmel's hell. Just gross. And I tend to agree with him on that. The way Jimmy Kimmel has been using his show lately has been disgusting. Which a lot of TV is. It really... It's almost unbearable to watch. It is unbearable. I have a few articles here. This one from gunowners.org. Okay, yeah, they'll still be biased. Oh, yeah. Gun control in Europe is almost total. It hasn't stopped mass shooting attacks like Las Vegas. Within hours of the horrible attack in Las Vegas, before we knew most of the relevant facts about the tragedy, gun control advocates were calling for more gun control. Here's something I would like those advocates to consider. Europe, which has all the gun controls that are being pushed in the aftermath of the Vegas carnage, has actually suffered more bloodshed from these types of attacks than the U.S. You heard that right. Countries such as France may have made all semi-automatic guns illegal, but that hasn't stopped killers from getting fully automatic machine guns to use in mass shooting attacks. All four of the 2015 mass public shootings in France involved machine guns, including the 130 people killed in November of that year, multiple attacks, including one at a concert venue. In the 1970s, 80s, and 90s, Europe saw machine gun attacks in airports and nightclubs by groups such as Black September and the Red Army faction. In fact, machine guns are commonly used in mass shootings in the rest of the world. This has not been the case here in the U.S. In fact, Sunday's attack on the Country Music Festival in Las Vegas has left 58, I think it's 59 now, people dead and more than 500 wounded. May be the first mass public shooting in the U.S. involving a machine gun if it turns out that the killer did use such a weapon. According to Wall Street Journal report, the gunman, 64-year-old Stephen Paddock, is believed to have used at least one fully automatic weapon, weapons that are heavily restricted under U.S. federal law. And that actually goes back to Fox News. I have another article here from Reason.com. Automatic weapons are already heavily regulated and gun control laws don't work. Stephen Paddock appears to have used at least one fully automatic rifle during his murderous rampage in Las Vegas, according to Wall Street Journal. Let's tentatively accept that for a moment while recognizing, as Nick Gillespie has noted, that early reports in situations like this are often wrong. If true, though, it demonstrates the pointlessness of the predictable calls for tighter gun restrictions issued by the usual suspects. That's because automatic rifle machine guns have been tightly regulated at the federal level since 1934 and subjected to further restrictions since then. The history of federal machine gun regulations is well covered at the website of the Bureau of Alcohol, Tobacco, Firearms, and Explosive Regulations. Began with the National Firearms Act of 1934, which imposed a $200 tax on the manufacture and transfer of shotguns and rifles having barrels less than 18 inches in length. Certain firearms described as any other weapons, machine guns, and firearm mufflers and silencers at the federal level, states and localities have always been free to impose their own restrictions, according to the ATF. As the legislative history of the law discloses, its underlying purpose was to curtail, if not prohibit, transactions in NFA firearms. The law was amended in 1968, and then again, in particular, in 1986. The latter revision was to prohibit the transfer or possession of machine guns. Exceptions were made for transfer of machine guns to or possession of machine guns by government agencies and those lawfully possessed before the effective date of prohibition, May 19, 1986. So for civilians, the only legal available automatic rifles in the United States under federal law come from the fixed pool of such weapons that existed on May 19, 1986, with a limited supply shrinking at least a bit over time through attrition. Prices for legal machine guns have no place to go but up. A glance at gunbroker.com, an online listing service with actual transfers handled by licensed dealers, reveals prices starting in four figures and rapidly going to five for individual weapons. Purchasing and owning any NFA firearm, including automatic rifle machine guns, requires undergoing a background check and entering the weapon in the National Firearm Registration Transfer Record, which is the central registry of all NFA firearms in the U.S., which are not in the possession or under the control of the U.S. government, according to the ATF National Firearms Act handbook. This handbook is an excellent resource for familiarizing yourself with the federal regulation of automatic rifle, machine guns, and other NFA firearms. Now, we don't know if it was, a actual fully auto, if he was using bump stock, which is one way of doing it. They also have trigger conversions, or it could have been a homemade conversion. Those are readily available on a lot of firearms under information. That, and then if people have really good insight on how mechanics work, they might be able to even figure it out themselves. And when it basically comes to getting your FFL, it's a really hard thing to do. From what I've heard, it takes a lot of money to, and your home becomes open basically to them coming in and inspecting it, where you will keep your guns. And it's a real big pain in the butt from what I've heard. And a really strict background check. I won't say what other people have called it. But I do want to get to a clip here. Stefan Molyneux, the truth about the Las Vegas shooting, and Stefan Paddock. This will cover a lot of what we do know. So we'll get into this. I'll talk about this right now.
October 1st, 2017, at approximately 10 p.m., 64-year-old Stephen Paddock used a hammer-like implement to smash two windows in his 32nd floor suite of the Mandalay Bay Casino in Las Vegas, Nevada. Outside the smashed windows, a crowd of approximately 22,000 had gathered for the Route 91 Harvest Country Music Festival. Inside were several gun tripods, 23 different firearms, some with scopes, others with bump stock devices, and thousands of rounds of ammunition. Bump stocks are legal accessories that allow semi-automatic weapons to fire at rates approaching that of fully automatic weapons. At 10:08 p.m., Las Vegas police reported receiving the first call of shots fired at the Country Music Festival, and 72 minutes later, Paddock was found dead in his room by the responding SWAT team. During those 72 minutes, 59 people were murdered, 527 were injured, and the lives of thousands were irreparably damaged forever as a result of the deadliest mass shooting in modern U.S. history. It only goes to show when seconds count, the police are almost an hour and a quarter away. Here are America's deadliest mass shootings by number of people killed. Modern era, Las Vegas, 2017, 59. Pulse nightclub, 2016, 49. Virginia Tech, 2007, 32. I remember doing the video for that too. Newton School, 2012, 27. Luby's Massacre, 1991, 23. San Isidro McDonald, 1984, 21. Austin, Texas, 1966, 16. U.S. Postal Service, 1986, 15. San Bernardino, 2015, 14. And Fort Hood, 2009, 13. According to witness Mike Cronk, kind of sounded like some fireworks going off. I think there was the first kind of volley, and then all of the sudden second volley, my buddy's like, I just got hit, you know. He got hit 3 times. Then people started diving for the ground. It was pretty much chaotic. Lots of people got hit. Witness Jasmine Barbuska said, all you heard were just gunshots, and every time the gunshots would come down, you'd just start getting to the ground. There were men going over their wives, their girlfriends, to block them. Unfortunately, those men got shot, but I mean, there were lives saved. Witness Brian Claypool said, the hardest for me was I saw 6 young women, they were maybe 20, 22, they were all crying on the ground. I was trying to be calm. I thought about the Orlando shooting because we were in this room. We didn't know where the shooter was. We thought he was going to jump the fence and come in this room and shoot us all. I'm thinking, am I going to die in this room? Witness Lisa Shao said, I just kept thinking to myself, this isn't real. This is not happening. This is not real. I just kept thinking that over and over, and it was. It is reported that Paddock engaged with a security guard prior to the arrival of the SWAT team, shooting him in the leg through a doorway. Paddock then killed himself prior to police entry. I don't know, maybe the security guards are not armed. What are they making? 13, 14, 15 bucks an hour? It's a lot to ask. Despite rumors and speculation, police note that there is no information or evidence to suggest that more than one shooter was involved. And you'll see this sort of stuff online. There were multiple shooters, but it's an echoey place. Sound is going to bounce around. Ooh, there was a muzzle flash from the 4th window, but Las Vegas is like the city of glass and mirrors, right? A car signal could turn. Somebody could take a picture. The light could bounce around. Could be the muzzle flash from higher up bouncing around. I don't know. Several pounds of ammonium nitrate, a type of fertilizer used to make explosives and made famous during the 1995 Oklahoma City bombing, were found in Paddock's parked vehicle at the hotel. Makes you wonder. It's not enough to do any particular kind of damage, but what happened to the rest of it? Where is it? What was it used for? At Paddock's Mesquite home, 19 additional firearms, explosives, electronic devices, and additional military-grade ammunition were found. So a little over an hour out of Vegas, but he did stay in Vegas. He was kind of a high roller of the gambling scene. He did stay in Vegas for a lot of time, from time to time. Since Paddock checked into Mandalay Bay on September 28th, several employees who had been in and out of the suite did not notice anything that would raise suspicion. People are asking, well, how could he get all this weaponry into a hotel? Well, put it in your luggage. It's not an airport. Using his alleged girlfriend Marilu Danley's ID to check into the hotel, Paddock used 10 suitcases to transport his weaponry. Marilu Danley has been described as both Paddock's girlfriend and or roommate and quickly became a person of interest. Police eventually located Danley in the Philippines, where she has been for 2 weeks. And detectives, quote, do not believe she is involved with the shooting. Come on, guys. How do you know? How could you possibly know that? As far as I know, there's not even been a formal interview of this woman, even remotely. How could you possibly know that she was out of town when this went down? It was later claimed that Danley is currently located in Tokyo, Japan. Now, there is an extradition treaty between the U.S. and the Philippines. Why not get her to come back and answer some questions? I don't know what you can charge her with or whether you can get her back for intensive questioning. I don't know, but it would seem to me to be job one to figure out what was going on in the home. Did she know all of these weapons were coming into the home? She lived.
Just she is apparently back in the U.S. and talking to authorities, so just that for an update.
There? Did she have any idea what was going on? Did he have any signs? Did he have any motives? You would want to talk to this woman. Maybe he's part of a network. Maybe she knows something. I don't know. Police have reported that Paddock had no criminal history except for a minor citation. NBC contradicted that widely accepted reporting by claiming Paddock was, quote, known to local law enforcement, but further details are not available. With a reported net worth of more than $2 million, Paddock doesn't fit the profile of the usual mass shooter. An accountant by trade, including a brief stint working for defense contractor Lockheed Martin, Paddock reportedly made his fortune through real estate deals, property management, and an undisclosed business. So this idea, you see, that poverty breeds crime, well, there are some challenges to the theory. Crime breeding poverty, on the other hand, well, Paddock also had an Alaskan hunting license and a private pilot's license and owned 2 planes, but his medical certification was not up to date, and thus he would not have been able to legally fly. According to court records, Paddock had been married and divorced twice. His first marriage lasted 2 years, from 1977 to 79, with him remarrying in 1985 and divorcing again in 1990, citing irreconcilable differences after 4 years of marriage. As a divorced retiree, Paddock had no children and plenty of money to play with, so he took up traveling and gambling. According to multiple currency transaction reports, Paddock was a serious gambler, at times gambling $10,000 to $30,000 per day at Las Vegas casinos. Now, that, of course, doesn't mean he lost that money. That's just the amount of money that was churning over in play. Investigators have started an investigation into Paddock's gambling habits in their search to uncover a possible motive. I remain skeptical of that. I don't know what the logical chain is between, I don't know, I have gambling debts, although he seemed to have lots of money. I have gambling debts, so let's shoot up a music festival. According to Paddock's brother, Eric Paddock, quote, it's like a job for him. It's a job where you make money. He was at the hotel for 4 months one time. It was like a second home. It had to be the right machine with double points, and there has to be a contest going on. He won a car one time. He's known. He's a top player. He's the small end of the big fish. So we're not talking Ben Affleck territory, but he was definitely a player of some kind. In 2012, Paddock filed a lawsuit against Cosmopolitan Hotels and Resorts, citing negligence, premises liability, but it was dismissed with prejudice in late 2014. No further details are available. While there has been fierce speculation as to Stephen Paddock's motive in committing the deadliest mass shooting in U.S. history, authorities have yet to provide answers. Former FBI hostage negotiator and behavioral science unit supervisor Clint Van Zandt, just wanted to point out that is a perfect name for the job. He said, my challenge is I don't see any of the classic indicators so far that would suggest, okay, he's on the road either to suicide or homicide or both. He knew what he wanted to do. He knew how he was going to do it, and it doesn't seem like he had any kind of escape plan at all. And this is important when it comes to dealing with these kinds of issues. We want to try and look at root causes, as I talked about in my previous video on this subject. We want to look at root causes, what happens early in life that might lead people down this path. because playing whack-a-mole and trying to deal with symptoms, his whole expertise is to trying to figure out how people or why people do this. Who's on this path? Doesn't have a clue. Las Vegas Sheriff Joe Lombardo said, "I can't get into the mind of a psychopath at this point." Photos of a man vaguely resembling Paddock at an anti-Trump rally in Reno, Nevada have circulated online, but no evidence exists to suggest that they are the same person or that the shooter was politically active. Allegations that the suspect's social media accounts indicated a support for various liberal media pundits are also incorrect. The claims that Antifa propaganda was found in Paddock's suite are currently unsubstantiated. An unidentified woman told local news in Las Vegas that a short Hispanic woman was escorted out of the concert 45 minutes before the shooting. Quote, "She'd been messing with a lady in front of her and telling her she was going to die, that we were all going to die. They escorted her out to make her stop messing around with all the other people, but none of us knew it was going to be serious." Contemporary Services Corporation was handling security for the event, and Chairman/CEO Damon Zumwalt later told BuzzFeed that this was a false report. I'm not sure what that means. I'm just telling you what was said. Islamic State news agency Amaq claimed that Paddock had, quote, "converted to Islam a few months ago," end quote, and that the Las Vegas attack was carried out by a soldier of the Islamic State, and he carried it out in response to calls to target states of the coalition. And as the coalition, of course, engaged in attacking ISIS at the moment. While the Islamic State is not typically known to claim responsibility for non-affiliated lone wolf attacks, it is not unprecedented. ISIS did claim responsibility for the Manila casino shooting in June 2017 that left 37 dead, but investigators did not link the incident to any terror group. Journalist Graham Wood has said, "The idea that the Islamic State simply scans the news in search of mass killings, then sends out press releases in hope of stealing glory is false. Amaq may learn details of the attacks from mainstream media and often gets those details wrong, also like mainstream media, but its claim of credit typically flows from an Amaq-specific source." Site Intelligence Group Director Rita Katz said, "We have not been able to find a real lie from ISIS, despite the fact that they are a terrorist organization. They want to provide their followers and supporters with authentic information." I guess they'd never say if you like your plan, you can keep your plan. Even though they have standards. Federal Bureau of Investigation Special Agent Aaron Rouse said, "We have determined, to this point, no connection to an international terrorist group." I am suspicious, to be honest, of the wording of this. You could say we've not been able to establish anything, but the way this is phrased makes it sound a lot more definitive than it is. This happened within hours of this attack. Did they go through all of his electronic devices? Are they not encrypted? Are they not password protected? Have they interviewed people? If he doesn't have a strong social media presence, you have to go boots to the ground. You have to go door to door. You have to follow the patterns. You haven't even interviewed his live-in girlfriend/roommate. But you know. That, to me, is very obfuscatory language, to put it mildly. Now, the Islamic State has doubled down on their claim, referring to Paddock as Abu Bakr al-Baghdadi. Stephen Paddock. This is a bit about his history. He was the oldest of 4 boys, with Eric being 8 years younger and Bruce and Patrick born in between. In July 1960, Paddock's father, Benjamin Hoskins Paddock, was accused of stealing approximately $25,000, the equivalent of $165,000 today, from 3 Phoenix banks and had a criminal record dating back to 1946. According to NBC News, quote, "An archived newspaper article from the Arizona Republic on October 6, 1960 described Benjamin Hoskins Paddock as a 3-time bank robber. The paper detailed how the 34-year-old attempted to run an agent over with his 1960 Pontiac before having a bullet shot through his window. After the bullet pierced his vehicle, he surrendered to authorities." According to then-neighbor Eva Price, "We're trying to keep Steve from knowing his father is held as a bank robber. I hardly know the family, but Steve is a nice boy. It's a terrible thing." Eric Paddock grew up thinking their father was already dead, only finding out he was alive when Patrick went to the Air Force Academy, and it was discovered that their father was a decorated veteran and still alive. According to brother Eric Paddock, "We didn't grow up under his influence. I was born on the run in Tucson. My dad was about to be arrested for robbing banks." So the mom had 4 children with a psychopathic bank robber. Serial con man. Good job, Mom. Way to pick the father for your children. Well, she got away with it. see about that. On January 5th, 1961, Paddock Sr. was sentenced to 20 years in prison for bank robbery, automobile larceny, and confidence game. On December 31st, 1968, Paddock escaped the Federal Correction Institution in Latuna, Texas, thus giving rise many decades later to MK-Ultra theories. After escaping from prison, Paddock was placed on the FBI's 10 most wanted list from 1969 to 1977. And the agency warned that he was, quote, diagnosed as psychopathic and, quote, reportedly has suicidal tendencies and should be considered armed and dangerous. FBI, June 1969. Paddock is known as Chrome Dome because of a practice of completely shaving his head. The agency reported he is an avid bridge player and smokes both cigars and cigarettes. They said he eats expensive steak dinners and is a frequent gambler. Not enough about genetics. After escaping, Paddock robbed a San Francisco bank and moved to the Eugene-Springfield area where he became a bingo parlor manager and lived under a fake identity until he was arrested in 1978. Shockingly, Paddock was paroled only a year later and returned to his bingo business. So just look at this. Just astonishing. 1961, he's sentenced to 20 years. That would kick him out in 1981. He's arrested in 1978 and paroled a year later. He served less time for escaping and robbing another bank than if he'd just stayed in prison. The system is mad sometimes. In 1987, Paddock Sr. faced 7 racketeering charges related to his bingo business and additional charges involving rolling back car odometers. Ultimately, the civil racketeering charges were settled for $623,000. Paddock pleaded no contest to the odometer situation, claimed to have cancer, and the judge decided to let him off with a $100,000 fine and no jail time. I got to tell you this, the man is known to be a con man, and I got to tell you, if you can con a judge by saying you have cancer, didn't really seem to have cancer, lived for quite some time after, but if you can't con a judge into letting you off when the judge already knows you're a con man, you're terrifyingly good at your job. Circuit Judge George Woodrich said, he could be conning everybody, but this is an economic crime and he's an old man. My view is let him go and good riddance. Right. Let him go into a community where I don't live. I bet you I'm in a gated community. I'm totally safe. Let the criminal go. He won't end up living anywhere near me or my kids. His girlfriend. How do you raise your sexual market value in some places? Yeah, rob a bank. Be on the run. Be a con man. Be a psychopath. Be suicidal. And the ladies will flock. Good job, ladies. Your loins are tingle in putting another log on the fire that's burning down the world. Girlfriend, Laurel Paulson said, I always felt... Not just a soft fabric, it's the end of us all. I always felt he spent his whole life trying to atone for his past. He really was an absolute soft touch and often gave away money when he didn't have a lot. He was a man that people either loved or hated. He always said he was a dinosaur. Yeah, Laurel, that means cold-blooded. You know that, right? So this woman likes him because he gives money away. I wonder if he gave any to her. I wonder what that might mean. Paddock died in January 1998 at 77 years old. Well, it's 11 years after he claimed to have cancer. Just saying. According to brother Eric Paddock, regarding the shooter, back to the shooter here, he said, he's my brother. We don't have a very close relationship, but we talk occasionally. There's no rhyme or reason here. It makes no sense. When you get a phone call that says your brother just killed a bunch of people, this is not... We're shocked, horrified, completely dumbfounded about this. There's absolutely no way I could conceive that my brother would shoot a bunch of people that he didn't know. Oh, man. We just break character here for a second. There's no way my brother would shoot a bunch of people that he didn't know? Oh, so if he knew them? I can't believe that Stephen was without friends. He went on to say, something just incredibly wrong happened to my brother. He was just a guy. Something happened. He snapped or something. He was just a guy. He has no political affiliation, no religious affiliation, as far as we know. This wasn't a terror attack. He's not an avid gun guy at all. The fact that he had those kinds of weapons is just, where the hell did he get automatic weapons? He doesn't have a military background or anything like that. When you find out about him, like I said, he's just a guy who lived in Mesquite, who drove down and gambled in Las Vegas, and he did stuff. Eat burritos. And when asked if Marilu Danley was his brother's girlfriend, he said, yes, Marilu, that's why I was on the phone with the cops. We were worried he might have hurt her too. They might have got married, but I don't think they are married. It's just his girlfriend. So this guy says, yeah, no political or religious affiliations, but he doesn't even know if his brother's married or not. It's not close. Come on. He said, regarding Marilu, she has nothing to do with this, at least from my perspective. Our family is okay. We're sitting in here in our house hoping that everyone doesn't attack us. My mother is 90 years old, lives down the street from me. We're just completely dumbfounded. You can imagine how this is affecting her. White knighting. So the woman who had a bunch of children with a psychopath is much loved by her children. I'm sure that doesn't warp values or morals at all. The brother said, if you told me an asteroid fell into Earth, it would mean the same to me. He went on to say, there's absolutely no sense, no reason he did this. He's just a guy who played video poker and took cruises and ate burritos at Taco Bell. There's no political affiliation that we know of. There's no religious affiliation that we know of. But you don't even know if he's married. President Donald Trump ordered the flags on all federal buildings to fly at half-staff following the mass shooting and held a moment of silence on the White House lawn. In positive news, blood banks received so many donations that they were even encouraging would-be donors to delay their visits due to the abundance of supply. In not-so-positive news, there is the reaction of many people. Jimmy Kimmel said, they should be praying for God to forgive them for letting the gun lobby run this country. There are a lot of things we could do about it, but we don't, which is interesting because when someone with a beard attacks us, we tap phones, we invoke travel bans, we build walls. We take every possible precaution to make sure it doesn't happen again. But when an American buys a gun and kills other Americans, then there's nothing we can do about that. Build walls? Jimmy, I don't think you've been paying attention. There's barely even prototypes at the moment. Now, if you take in more Middle Eastern immigrants after 9/11 than before, I'm not sure every conceivable precaution is being taken. Just putting that out there. And this is the thing, too. When, as you point out, Jimmy, a man with a beard attacks, as in the Pulse nightclub, what happens? Well, the liberals say, or the left says, well, we have to continue as we did before, and nothing should change. And when people throw acid and blow people up and drive trucks through Christmas crowds in Europe, everyone says, we can't let this affect our way of life. We must change nothing. But a semi-ancient lunatic, evil man shoots, and suddenly it's all about gun. Because he's white, to be honest. We know what it is. Richard Dawkins said, now, the man's had a stroke, so a tiny bit of leeway maybe. He tweeted this. Darn tootin', great shootin', cool dude, certain he'd Second Amendment rights. Hell yeah, every country has its psychopaths, in U.S. they have guns. I don't know. Richard Dawkins doesn't like guns, but I'm not sure where he feels a good portion of his salary came from when he was working for a state-funded university and how that money was collected. They don't ask. Senator Ben Cardin said, we must act. Automatic weapons aren't needed to hunt deer or ducks. They're meant to kill people, and they do far too often in this country. Then I wonder, just, perhaps you could answer me this in the comments below. If you say they do it far too often, what is the right amount of often? Just wondering. Joe Biden said, appalled by the senseless loss of life in Las Vegas. Jill and I hold all these affected and grieving in our hearts. How long do we let gun violence tear families apart? Enough. Congress and the White House should act now to save lives. There's no excuse for inaction. Yeah, it's hard to go to the government when people are well-armed, isn't it, Joe? It's a bit of a challenge. The left love no-fault divorce. They love these family-shredding divorce courts. I wonder if they were concerned that Hillary tore families apart by destroying Middle Eastern countries on a regular basis. But now it's all about the families. You know, when you put the welfare state in, liberals, the black family was pretty much destroyed. Do you feel like getting rid of the welfare state so the black family can reintegrate and heal itself? No. You don't care about families. You care about power. Guns are in the way. I get it. Ben Rhodes said, "We have spent trillions of dollars fighting wars to prevent acts of terrorism. We could save far more lives with rational gun restrictions." Democracy for America said, and I'm sorry to repeat this, but this is what they said. They said, "The NRA is unrepentant. They and their allies in Congress don't think there's anything wrong with what happened in Las Vegas last night." Got to read that again. They said, they and their allies in Congress don't think there's anything wrong with what happened in Las Vegas last night. In fact, they are doubling down in support of laws that enable white men like Stephen Paddock to use guns to terrorize their families and communities. Right. There's been a lot of this floating around. More in danger from white terrorists than from Muslim terrorists. Well, only if you start the clock on September 12th, 2001. If you take out 9/11, well... See, now this is interesting. By bringing race into this, fascinating. A lot of the liberals are bringing race into this. He's white. There's a crime. Wow. That is a pretty interesting opening, and I appreciate the opportunity. I really think we should sit down and talk about correlations between race and crime. That would be quite fascinating. You guys have opened the door. All that happens now is the data walks through. Hillary Clinton said, "Las Vegas, we are grieving with you, the victims, those who lost loved ones, the responders, and all affected by this cold-blooded massacre. The crowd fled at the sound of gunshots. Imagine the deaths if the shooter had a silencer, which the NRA wants to make easier to get. Our grief isn't enough. We can and must put politics aside, stand up to the NRA, and work together to try to stop this from happening again." I don't even know what to say. I can make a Jackie Chan face. We must put politics aside and stand up to the NRA. It's the same sentence. The comma doesn't make it a different planet. It's the same sentence. They don't even notice. Let's go north-south. Now, Clinton is vaguely referring to the Hearing Protection Act sponsored by South Carolina Representative Jeff Duncan, which would allow for more individuals to purchase silencers protecting the hearing of avid shooters. The failed presidential candidate's assumption that the use of silencers could have made the Las Vegas shooting worse have been rebutted by mainstream outlets, and all with cursory knowledge of the technology. Washington Post said, "Clinton and others appear to be assuming that silencers, or suppressors as they're known in the industry, work the way that they do in the movies. Screw a little barrel on the end of your pistol, and you can run through enemy headquarters picking off bad guys with no more audio footprint than a little zip, Asymmetric Solutions firearm training firm director of development, Thomas Satterley, said, "A suppressor wouldn't have stopped anyone from doing what they did and definitely wouldn't have hidden the noise of the gunfire. Back in the day, when we had silencers, you could screw a brand new silencer on a weapon and maybe the first 2 rounds were really suppressed. Once you shoot the baffles out, the sound is almost the same. I can definitely say it wouldn't have changed anything. It wouldn't have hidden the sound enough. Again, that's just Hollywood." Now, of course, other outlets have pointed out that the suppressor would just melt with high-volume firing and it would prove useless. So, this could have been your president, folks. See, I try not to make massive pronouncements on, say, the best way to perform open-heart surgery, because I don't really know anything about open-heart surgery. But nothing spells Dunning-Kruger like confident pronouncements about things you know nothing about. Now, fully automatic weapons, gun control. Here's a little brief primer for those who seem confused by the issue or susceptible to liberal propaganda. Under the National Firearms Act, it is currently in the United States illegal for any private civilian to own fully automatic weapons manufactured after May 19th, 1986. According to the Bureau of Alcohol, Tobacco, Firearms, and Explosives, It is even illegal to make replacement parts for pre-1986 machine guns. Quote, there is no exception allowing for the lawful production, transfer, possession, or use of a post-May 18, 1986 machine gun receiver as a replacement receiver on a weapon produced prior to May 19, 1986. So these are kind of old weapons now, decades and decades old. No replacement parts. They're collector's items. They're under glass, I would assume. But the most part, they are Bugsy Malone-style guns. Now, the process involved in even obtaining a pre-1986 machine gun is incredibly extensive, costly, time-consuming, and the weapons themselves are typically well north of $10,000 in cost to buy. The Federalist co-founder Sean Davis has said, fully automatic weapons are highly regulated under both federal and state law. Only licensed entities are permitted to manufacture, sell, or own them. Private civilian ownership of machine guns is illegal unless the individual has been explicitly permitted by the federal ATF to own them. All fully automatic weapons must be registered with the federal government in a central registry with no exceptions. A special tax is levied on all NFA items, machine guns, suppressors, short-barreled rifles, short-barreled shotguns, and destructive devices with no exceptions. So, if this guy modified, if he got it some other way, the law did not prevent him. So more laws is a fool's response to a situation where the law has already been broken. And also, when you're talking about gun control, you're talking about things being illegal and that suppressing actions. Here's a little hint. If you're on an upper floor of a hotel and casino, and you are setting your sights down on 22,000 people crammed into a music festival, and you are pouring round after round of hot lead from the skies down into their fragile, defenseless, and helpless bodies, you're already committing an illegal act. Forget gun control. You know what's illegal? Murder. Mass murder. And that did not stop him. The law did not stop him. You understand the point here? Now, just before I get to my conclusion, I just wanted to point out this came up just after I finished the recording. Las Vegas shooter Stephen Paddock wired $100,000 to an account in his live-in girlfriend/friend's home country, the Philippines, in the week before he committed this shooting. What does that mean? It seems to me she's a little bit more than a roommate. If that's the case, maybe the money's going to some other entity in the Philippines. It's hard, of course, at this point to come to any conclusions. So the officials, of course, have confirmed that Marilu Danley, this perhaps girlfriend, was in the Philippines on the Sunday when he shot up the crowd. It's not known at this time whether the money was for her or her family or another purpose or another organization. That does show a pretty strong tie. What does it back up? What does it prove? I don't know as yet, but I thought the information should be in your mind. So, gun control, of course, is raising its ugly head. Now, I've got a whole presentation, The Truth About Gun Control. We'll link to it below. You really should check it out. But there is no such thing as gun control. Gun control is a magic phrase invented to hide the truth. Here's the reality. I said this years ago. I'm going to say it again verbatim. If you are for gun control, then you are not against guns, because the guns will be needed to disarm people. So it's not that you're anti-gun. You'll need the police's guns to take away other people's guns. So you're very pro-gun. You just believe that only the government, which is, of course, so reliable, honest, moral, and virtuous, should be allowed to have guns. There is no such thing as gun control. There is only centralizing gun ownership in the hands of a small political elite and their minions. The idea that more guns equals more crime, it's like an IQ test. It's like an intelligence test. You just have to look up a basic chart. Per capita gun murders in the U.S. are far lower than many other countries. And gun ownership since the 1990s has been going up significantly in the United States, and up until the Ferguson effect driven by the liberal media, violent crime was going down. Gun ownership going up, violent crime going down. Now that is reversed as a result of Michael Brown, hands up, don't shoot, race-baiting narrative of the mainstream media, which actually started earlier, started all the way back with Rodney King, and escalated, of course, in a variety of other incidents, Trayvon Martin included. So this is an important thing to understand. You cannot continue to escalate control over the citizenry and deal with all of these issues and their root causes. I don't know what the root cause is. This still remains to be examined. Let's say he was programmed by ISIS. Let's say he was done. Who knows? Maybe the Antifa thing, I don't know. But I will say this, which I have said before. Whatever he did and why ever he did it, his childhood did not help. I'll tell you one other thing. The psychopathic, con man, armed robbery father was rightly recognized as immoral and evil. The mother who had children after children after children with this man seems to be honored and venerated in her old age. That is a disparity which is not healthy, in my view, at all. Lack of moral clarity regarding women, regarding male disposability, all these men draping themselves on unknown women's bodies and getting themselves shot up. I don't see any particular feminist academics pointing out how cowardly the women were, that they should have been draping themselves on men's bodies, because otherwise they're just tools of the patriarchy. It's not going to happen. Less equality in protecting other people. What was the one guy is like, oh, I'm just got to strategize. Is the guy coming in? What's going on? What are the women doing? They're curled up on the ground crying. Or another guy strategizing, finger, well, where's the guy coming from? You see the guy giving the finger, trying to figure out, holding the beer. Cassandra, don't. He's giving the finger to the shooter. And what's the woman doing? One of the reported women is standing there with her hands, I assume metaphorically, over her ears, maybe for real, saying, this is not real, this is not real, this is not real, this is not happening. Not helping. The answer to violence is the improvement of childhood. The answer to violence is the improvement of childhood. A comment was made on the video that I put out about this yesterday. It struck me. I'm paraphrasing. And a guy wrote and said, I was a corrections officer in the 70s and the 80s. And I was responsible for reading the letters that the prisoners wrote, make sure that they weren't coded signals for criminal activity or something. And I'll never forget, I read one letter that a criminal wrote to his mother, and he said, I wouldn't even be here if you'd lifted a finger to stop Dad and his friends raping me throughout my childhood. Male evil is pretty clear and visible and evident to us. It is the sun in the sky. Can't miss it. Female evil, female collusion with evil, female breeding with evil. It's a little bit like the moon behind a tree, a little harder to see. We must see it. We must hold women accountable for their reproductive decisions. It does not make them criminal, but it makes them the enablers and the breeders of criminals. And since personality has significantly genetic elements, reproduction with evil can be a form of civilization-ending bioweaponry that only the women fundamentally can control.
Stefan Molyneux on YouTube. Check him out. Subscribe. Now, when I look at it, you know, there is genetics that play a part in it. I think there is also a childhood, how you're raised, but there's also choices. You know, my father was an alcoholic, still is an alcoholic. I rarely ever drink. My mom raised me, divorced my dad when I was very young. That probably helped out, played a part in it. And, you know, the way I treat women would be completely different from how my dad treated me. Now, there's characteristics of my dad that I have, but I think, you know, a lot of times you can find those characteristics not because of, oh, your father was like that. No, I think it plays a lot more into the individuality of people, and you're always going to find common things. Um, my patience tends to not be the best. I work on it, but that actually benefits me in a lot of things where I'm someone that can get something done when it's not getting done fast enough. I it doesn't help in the fact that it makes it harder for me to show people things because I just want to get it done, and to like slow down to allow someone else to understand it is hard for me because I'm impatient. I just want to get it done. Um, my dad's impatient, but where does that come from? For me, I think it comes from the years of doing mechanic work. I worked flat rate, meaning I got paid book time. If the book said it takes 3 hours to do that job, I got paid 3 hours, whether it took me 1 hour or 6. So everything I tend to do, I just want to get it done. You know, I know how to do it. I just want to do it. I don't want to dilly daddle around. It's and sometimes that also causes me that if I'm having to rely on people and it's not getting done, I don't. You know, I'm done. You know, if people can't do what I pay them for, you know, ask them to do, and they agree to. Um, it discourages me to the point I don't want to, you know, if that's how it's going to be, I don't want to. But I've worked on that in years, and I'm a lot more patient now. Um, and, you know, I've seen it too in the people around me because people that have had to rely on, you know, learning from me um, have been able to really catch on and just flourish and understand things better. Part of that is them and me, you know. But genetics can play when it comes to certain, you know, mental issues. And when you have 4 children, the chance of, you know, one of those 4 maybe having some type of mental issue. And then if he was on anxiety pills, you know, there's some characteristics that they have correlated with, you know, his father. But we don't know the truth. We can't confirm, and I've seen the photo too, and I can't confirm, yes, that's him in that, you know, anti-Trump rally or protest. Um, I can't confirm that. Now, relating to the um, gunfire, multiple shooters, and audio, and being a, you know, avid shooter myself, and then also living in Indianapolis when I was in school down there. Um, at one point, I lived in a pretty rough area. Cheap, right? College student, not a lot of money. And you know, the echoing, the urban fire, and people in Chicago hear this all the time. And there's videos you can find on YouTube. People driving around, all of a sudden pulling over and filming it. You just hear rapid fire. And we'll get to some Chicago or Illinois kind of information here soon. It's real hard to hear, and then you have the footage from the event itself. You're also hearing the scraping of all these bullets flying by all these people. You can hear it. It's hitting. You can hear it getting closer to the cameraman. So it makes it real hard. At one point, I do believe I hear 2 different calibers. And I don't believe it's an echo. Because I believe I hear an echo, too, of 2 different calibers. That doesn't mean he didn't, try to dual gun it. Which would explain why that sound didn't last long because, well, if you're trying to one-hand a bump stock, if anybody shot some of these different types of rifles, it's hard to try to, it would be hard to manipulate 2 of them to be able to fire and not jam. And there's at one point that I believe it did jam. Photos of all the rifles, I don't know what to believe because I could not tell if I seen any 100-round clips, possible 50-round clips, and I don't know that there's a lot of bulk action rifles. It just seems like there's something odd about it. And then when they also talk about undisclosed business that he was involved in. And with those type of guns, that many guns, it seems very odd. Something just, there's something odd about the whole deal. And I can't put my finger on it. I think it's a conspiracy. I don't know, if this is some type of conspiracy. What I think that he may have left leaning, that's a good possibility. I think that at the end of the day, we got to just look at this as a tragic event. There's a really good article here at Reason. A massacre is not an argument. I think we need to separate a gun argument from emotional event. We don't see in all these countries, while we do see in certain areas that they want to ban cars from certain cities because, well, people might use them to run over people. And think about how restrictive society could get every time someone finds something new. Remember the mass stabbing over in China? What if you could only buy plastic knives? Then what if, all you could have was a spork? Plastic spork. Where do we want to take this? Because nut jobs will find whatever they can to hurt people. There's evil about it. And not all the time are they just, some dumb, idiot or, young kid. Some people that are evil could also be smart. I say, look at Congress. You want smart, evil people, look at Congress. I believe there is. I'm not going to name any names. But I believe out of all the people in Congress, that not all of them can believe what they say. Or push for. That it'll help. I believe they are doing it for power grab. And really, if you wanted a communist, socialist overthrow of America, you would definitely have to get rid of people having firearms. Definitely when those people are on the opposite spectrum, knowing that while most gun owners tend to be more conservative, so they are a force to be reckoned with. With the right generals, will the military stand up to a political overthrow of our current system? If their commander in chief and his appointed generals allow it and push for it? I used to say, they tend to be more conservative. But really, you look at the construct of the military anymore, and it's been infiltrated by the PC type people. And I almost wonder if that's part of why Trump was pushing, ban on transgender, feeling that it was becoming a more political thing. Okay, so I want to play one more clip of some facts. This from We Are Change. So let's go ahead and dive into this real quick. It's a short clip.
Hey everybody, Jason Burmis here reporting for change.org. And today we're going to have to talk about the events in Las Vegas at the Mandalay Bay and at this concert as we know them right now. Now, first of all, when I first heard the news, I was in shock. Opening fire on a large crowd of people indiscriminately with heavy ammunition is probably one of the most deplorable things you could possibly do. Now, when this first began and the initial stories began to run, I thought to myself, well, this is probably somebody who is on medications, SSRIs, antidepressants, and that is probably the cause of it if the narrative we were being given was, in fact, the truth. Now, in this video, we're really not going to speculate. We're going to put out evidence and let you, the viewer, decide how valid that evidence is. Because right now, we had people out of the gates saying this guy was a Trump supporter, other people saying he had Antifa stuff on him, both of which sound extremely speculative to me. So as far as the official narrative has gone, this is a lone gunman in his early to mid-60s who had a lot of money due to gambling. He also apparently wired his wife $100,000 outside of the country just prior to these attacks and planned them because he was there since the 28th, several days before the attack actually took place. They've now said they found over 20 weapons in his room, which he took up on multiple trips while he was staying at the hotel. Now the speculation begins. Obviously, people have tried to pin this on one side or the other so it can benefit their own political rhetoric, and others have claimed false flag out of the gates. But once again, we're going to look at what's out there. Now, Zero Hedge has posted an article showing the majority of the videos out there that claim to show the possibility of either a second shooter or the shooting happening on a lower level, aka not the 32nd floor. Now, we'll show you a few clips of these videos and what they're talking about, basically a flashing. Other videos have also claimed to debunk this.
There. Oh, shit.
Lady who claims that there was a concert goer who was with her boyfriend who started claiming that everybody was going to die that night and then was escorted off by security. I'm not sure if this has any relevance or any significance whatsoever, but it's out there and we figured we'd show it to you.
Yes, because she had been messing with the lady in front of her and telling her that she was going to die, that we were all going to die. So they escorted her out to make her stop messing around with all the other people in front of them, but none of us knew that it was going to be serious.
Now, apparently, there's also footage that has surfaced of the shooter, Stephen Paddock, in one of those pussy hats, which would align him with feminism and possibly the liberal or progressive left. Again, I don't know how valid this is. We can't confirm it's Stephen Paddock, but it is something that's going around, so we wanted to show you that too. Now, I'm going to reluctantly include this information as well. I have a contact who's a former professional athlete, and I'll leave it at that, who also resides in Vegas. And he gave me some second and third hand information that I cannot verify, but I'm going to put out into the public arena in case any of this evidence later comes up on the police scanners or somewhere else. He claimed there were reports of multiple shooters from multiple areas, including the New York, the Tropicana, and the Excalibur. And that at one point, they had somebody in custody who was dropping IEDs on the strip that were found. That this, no matter what, is not a left or right issue. This is truly about right and wrong. Who would dare fire into an open crowd of people, executing innocents everywhere at random? It has nothing to do with somebody's political beliefs, but everything to do with their own mental illness. And I really hope that this issue does not become a divisive one, and that the truth does come out as to what actually occurred. As always, if you like this video, please subscribe, share it on social media, follow me on Twitter @JasonBurmis, and if you can, go to wearechange.org, make that donation. It's only through your financial support that videos like this one are possible.
We Are Change on YouTube. Check them out. Subscribe. wearechange.org. Check them out. Now, you know, again, I listened to the audio, and being someone that's, I fired, high power rifles, British 303s, Mosin Nagants, 308s, AKs, SKs, ARs, and then also being in a urban environment that I've heard gunfire and echoing and bouncing off buildings, and I listened to it. Possibility of two different calibers at the same time does not mean multiple shooters. I don't know the facts. There could have been. There could be something we're not being told. Now, I don't know where the Bellagio is from that, and that video. Shooter. There could have been. He could have fired at more than just that concert. We don't know the full truth. He could have been, he could have lit that area up, lit our area up, and then started lighting that area up again. I don't know. This article from KansasCity.com, Kansas man was in the hotel right below the Vegas shooter during the massacre. Like many people at the concert below, the man in the hotel room directly beneath the Las Vegas shooter's room initially thought fireworks were going off. Floyd Conrad of Emporia, Kansas, was in Vegas for business. He was getting ready for bed on the 31st floor of the Mandalay Bay Resort and Casino. By his account, the moments leading up to 10:08 p.m. local time didn't particularly stand out, but then the rapid-fire shots sounded. Conrad 50, noticed bits of glass scraping his window as they plummeted toward the ground, where 22,000 people at a country music concert came to realize they were taking fire in a crowded pen with few escape routes. At least 59 would lose their lives, more than 500 would be injured. Conrad moved away from the windows as bullets rained. He went to his bedroom and always kept something between himself and the glass. He stood and he sat. He used an app on his phone to listen to law enforcement chatter, he told the Star and KWCH 12. Jason Boatwright. At some point, he decided to poke his head into the hallway, where he saw 4 or 5 armed officers, one of whom demanded that he return to his room. He did. He sat and waited. Given the darkness and his high vantage point, he couldn't make out details on the ground. A few times he moved toward the window. Most of the time he stayed away from the window. He heard officers over the radio announce the gunman's room number. He was one digit off from his 31134 and adjoining room 135. Stephen Paddock, the shooter, was in 32134 and adjoining room 135. Conrad felt safe enough through it all because of the concrete between him and a mass murder. The explosion above that signified officers breached Paddock's room, startled Conrad more than the gunfire did. The gunfire was surprisingly quiet from within his room. The footsteps of investigators combing the room seemed loud. Glass crunched beneath their feet. The footfalls padded across his ceiling. Through the night, Conrad could tell their probe was intent and thorough. He didn't sleep much that night, but 1:30 a.m. things seemed to have wound down. About 4 a.m., a SWAT team came through his room. Mandalay Bay Resort Casino right overlooks an outdoor festival ground across the street. When daybreak hit, he could see the debris and the first responders in what he thought were body bags on the ground. The havoc from the night before took a surreal quality. Days have passed and he's still in that room. Business calls. He'll fly home Friday back to his larger family, including 6 children. He never considered trying to change rooms. He considers a shooting a freak event, something that could happen anywhere, and that there was no damage to his room, so why leave it? Conrad, who said he's a supporter of the Second Amendment, grew up hunting. He was taught to respect the rifles and shotguns he handled as a child. But this guy was dealing with something way more above that. I like that. He understood. Yeah, there's crazy people out there. And they'll do crazy things with whatever they can get their hands on. There's, again, a lot of conspiracy out there to what exactly happened. Right now, we can only base our theories on what facts are out there, and we'll see what gets released. Sometimes I am weary of things that do get released, but I do think this is a freak event that the person that snapped was there and why he targeted. If he was just, was he planning on targeting that, or was that a convenient event for his mental breakdown? But really, we have to be understanding for the grieving, and even the families that might go, oh, we need gun control because this was so devastating to our family. We have to be understanding, but that doesn't mean we give up our rights. Jimmy Kimmel will talk all the talk why he increases armed security around him. It's really funny when you have these elitists with their armed security talking about taking the rights of people that can't afford armed security, can't trust on the cops to be there 24/7, aren't, being security for you, nor do you want government there 24/7, because government can become an out of control, tyrannical killer. Don't believe me? Look at a history book once in a while. But we do have to be understanding that this was traumatic. This was devastating. This will scar people. And then rather than look at political ploy, we just need to be caring in the way we approach it with people that have been traumatized by this, that are on the opposite side of rights. Because they are having an emotional reaction to this. If I truly thought us giving up all of our gun rights would literally just stop all gun crime, and we wouldn't have gun crime anymore, and that government wouldn't become tyrannical when you don't have armed citizens. If I believe that, I would give up my guns, but there's absolutely zero proof to that. In reality, there's evidence that supports the opposite. And if you take away the top, I think, 5 or 6 cities that are top in the U.S. for murder, which also have the strongest gun laws, we would be like 4th up from the bottom. For murders related to guns. That's pretty interesting. Now, we're going to see the political ploys all over media. And really, I kind of urge people to turn off their TVs to any of it. Because when they start pushing this, hit them on their ratings. Tell them we don't want it, we're not tuning in for the propaganda game. I know a lot of listeners out there already avoid TV. I almost have to. It's really hard to watch TV anymore because it's just so much political agenda from the left that it's almost sickening. Makes you want to throw up your mouth. I want to thank everybody for tuning in tonight. Stay tuned here on UCY.TV. Great broadcast coming up right after this. Go to UCY.TV, scroll down to the bottom, click that Amazon button. Shop Amazon through UCY.TV, and UCY gets a little kickback to help cover operating costs at no extra charge to you. And don't forget My Patriot Supply. Go to antityrannynews.com/MyPatriot. Check out My Patriot Supply. And at no extra cost to you, we get a little kickback to help cover our operating costs on our end. And again, thank you for tuning in tonight. And, again, we really have to be there for each other without giving up our rights. We don't have to give up our rights to care for one another, to be there. I know a lot of people feel like you can't talk to a lot of people on the left, but you'd be surprised how many people just kind of go along or agree, but when you are friends or befriend someone and then they hear your points of view after they get to know you, whole different thing. Thank you all. Stay tuned.